Let's find out what you're really worth to your business. The Two Business Guys Mastermind on it, coming up next. Enjoy. This business podcast, the Two Business Guys Mastermind, uncovers for you secrets and share tips and tricks to entrepreneurship as they mastermind on how to have startup, operational, and overall business success so that you can go on to get better results. Enjoy. Everybody, Rob was dropping dimes before we started hitting record on this episode, and it made me change the whole direction. I wanted to talk about software. I wanted to talk about GPT-3. I wanted to talk about chat. I wanted to talk about chat AI and all this kind of stuff. And then he dropped some massive value into the conversation. And Rob, repeat what you were talking about the inputs to your business and how we assign value to them to determine. And now everyone, thanks for coming on back, listening to us one more week. We enjoy you. If you like some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, send it to people that you know and say, hey, these dudes are talking about some good stuff. Go ahead and check them out. But you were talking about the value points, right? These inputs, how do you determine them? And then Rob said that, hey, I'm bringing on somebody, right? So now you've got to determine this person I'm bringing on. Now, me, I'm a software guy. I believe in apps and software and stuff like that. But I think it still stands true that we have to ask questions of these software because I'm doing that now. I'm like, wait a minute, I could go with this software, get rid of what I'm doing now, but I have to ask a question. How is the input and the cost, right, going to be valued out? So if you're out there right now asking yourself, do I get a team? Do I get software? Do I do it myself? This conversation might just be for you. So Rob, extend that on what you're saying and break that out for us.
Yeah, it's basically an opportunity cost conversation, right? And when we started talking about this, we were talking about the fact that a lot of times our previous lens as we go into business blinds us from the realities of the things that we're doing. So many of us come at business from the supply side of labor, right? We come as employees, as labor, and we value that labor at a very different level than the businesses that we interact with. And oftentimes there's this feeling of being underpaid. And then so when you get into business, there's this feeling and a legitimate feeling of not wanting to underpay people, wanting to pay people what they're worth, quote unquote. The problem is oftentimes we don't have the right ability to evaluate what, quote unquote, people are worth to our business. And those are two different conversations, right? There's a different conversation to what somebody is worth in life in general, right? Even what their work is worth and what their work is worth to our business. So for example, celebrity endorsers. Kevin Hart may be worth a ton of money to Capital One endorsing their credit card, whereas him coming and endorsing my product may not be worth 1/10 of what it's worth to Capital One, because we don't have the systems in place. We don't have the capability, the capacity to fulfill the number of orders that would necessitate that price. Let's say it's $1 million or whatever that he's getting from Capital One. He would have to sell 10 million items in our business for it to be worth $1 million for us. But oftentimes we're not capable of looking at what it's worth to us. We just know what it's worth in the market. And that's when you're bringing on team members, when you're bringing on anything. And so one of the things that I was talking to Randy about is it's something that I'm learning now I've read about it, heard about it. This is how Warren Buffett built, Berkshire Hathaway, right? Him and Charlie Munger, their whole thing was they got really good at understanding what a company was worth to them based on their idea of what a good company was. And then they went and found companies that to them were worth more than what the market said that they were worth. And they went and bought those companies because they knew that in the long term, the market would figure it out. They would be ahead of the market in what those companies were worth. They could buy them for a cheaper price than they were worth. And over time, they would make the money of the difference between the market understanding what the company was worth versus them having that understanding. And that was the whole idea of value investing. And in business, that's really a lot of what we're trying to do, right? What we're trying to do is we're trying to find teams or trying to find people that either A, have tremendous value to our business that we can pay whatever we need to pay. And it's a 1-for-1 or the synergy of them working with us creates a profit. Right. So even if you're paying somebody exactly what they're worth right now, the fact that they're working with you creates a profit because there's extra value that's added to the business by you all coming and working together. Or you find people who may not be worth what they could be worth in the marketplace right now. So nobody would pay them.
So are you saying that they're unaware?
Not only are they
unaware of their talents.
And it's not even unaware of their talents. It's that their talents by themselves don't do anything. And I talk about this with factories a lot, right? So the idea, right? One auto worker in the 1910s, 1920s was not worth a lot because one auto worker could not put out a lot of cars. One auto worker could put out like one car a year in the 1910s. But when you put auto workers together with the assembly line process that Henry Ford pioneered, the value of all of those auto workers exponentially increased. But it wasn't just because they were there and they were working. No, it was them and their labor plus a system that coordinated their labor. And in that space, it exponentially increased their value in the market. And it's what allowed Henry Ford to say he actually paid double the going wage for an auto worker at that time. But there was enough profit for them to make twice as much as everybody else in their profession, and for him to make profit, and for them to lower the cost of the cars. There was so much that was built based on those synergies, right? The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And part of our job as entrepreneurs is to start understanding how those synergies come to be and to create scenarios where those exist. And one part of that is understanding the system, understanding the inputs and the outputs, understanding what the true value of something is to your business. So when you're talking about software, if it costs $100, the question you have to ask yourself is, what am I going to make with this $100? Am I only going to make $100? Am I going to make $200? Am I going to make $500? Am I going to make $1,000 based on the application of this software? If you buy the software for $100, but it only makes you $90, you've actually lost money, even though it did make you some money. But it didn't make you what it cost you to acquire. And we're not even talking about time and, energy into learning the software, applying the software, using the software, all the rest of that. We're just talking about the base cost of the software.
Yeah. And that's where I think you have to be aware of the actual inputs you're putting into the business as well, right? So Rob, I can give you a little pushback on that. But as Rob is a former lawyer, I might not win that argument. But I could push back a little bit on that because I think, and this is something that you've drilled in my head a lot of times, right? It is, okay, it's going to cost you time up front, but does it give you time back later? So in that ramp up period, software, you got to learn it. And this is what I think, especially the solo entrepreneur, which I, love the solo entrepreneur. And, I can stomp my feet with the best of them talking about just do it yourself. But as I started thinking about and asking those value questions, and then I says, well, having a whole bunch of people around, that could get costly in its own right because I didn't know how to value what the people were doing. So I went the software route, right? So it's what app can do this thing that person could do. Right. And then the question comes up, well, who's gonna implement the software? And if that's you, you've got to have an idea of what that value to you is Either
Mm-hmm.
you learning the software,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then saying, okay, it took me X amount of time, whereas a person blah, blah, blah. And then, but here's when I get it back.
Exactly.
Right. And why I like this conversation for our entrepreneurs, as you're listening in, there's going to be those points where you say, when do I hire someone?
Mm-hmm.
When do I implement this system that may take some learning curve out? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When do I do each? And it's going to be based on the value that you have determined it will bring back. So how does that leads me to down a very a curious path. How do you determine that? Okay, so you got a person, like you say, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to bring on a financial person that's going to be able to drop some stuff in your mind or in your
Mm-hmm.
business. Me personally, I've been doing some trainings, right? I went and bought 3 courses because I'm off from teaching the entrepreneurs for until like
Mm-hmm.
February. So I
Mm-hmm.
says, you know what? All I'm going to do is spend all day either reading or learning some new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere in there, Rob, I'll say to myself, man, am I wasting time here?
Mm-hmm.
Should I be doing something else? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder, when you bring a person on, how are you valuing what that person's bringing? Okay, this is going to cost me,
Oh, that's a
$50 an
phenomenal
hour.
question.
I expect to get 150 back in the business. I mean, tell me
Mm-hmm.
about that.
No, that is a phenomenal question. And that, like, to your point, the pushback that you gave, I think it is actually appropriate, which is you have to be able to ask those questions of, how do I evaluate this return on investment? How do I evaluate this opportunity cost? And I think what happens, we've talked about this book a number of times, the difference between millionaires and the middle class. And one of the things that I think hurts us the most is, for most of us that are coming from, middle class and lower class backgrounds into entrepreneurship, our mindset is day to day, week to week, check to check, month to month.
Uh-huh.
Right. And it's really hard to see that the return on investment in that short of a time span, because of so many of the inputs that have to go into it. And so then what winds up happening is we wind up hoping, right? So we wind up purchasing
Hope
and
don't make
hoping,
money.
right? And we don't do the extra work of saying, when will this make us money? We wind up saying,
Right.
I know that it has potential to make me money. I don't know how much, but I hope that it'll be the best case scenario. And one of the things that I've learned is that if you start looking at, like the book says, millionaires and deca millionaires and uber rich, thinking yearly and, decade time spans, just being able to look at something over the span of a year, right? You can actually look at it, and there's a couple of simple, calculations you can think of, right? So, for example, the average full-time job for an American is calculated generally at about 2,080 hours, right? It's
Yep.
40 hours a
40
week,
hours, 52 weeks.
52 weeks, right? Now, if you think about that in chunks, if you say, and if you take off 2 weeks, then that's 2,000 hours, right? So 2,000 hours is the amount of time that you would put into a full-time job.
Uh-huh.
So then your question is, how many hours is it going to take me to learn whatever this software is, and then to implement this software over the course of the year,
Uh-huh.
right? What percentage of my time over the course of the year is it going to take me to do this? So let's say you think it's going to take you 10 hours a week, all right?
Uh-huh.
10 hours a week, that's
So should people
500
be
hours.
doing that?
Yeah,
Putting down on paper, I think it's going to take me 10 hours a week,
right.
right? Because then I think they'll introduce the law of Parkinson's, right? Things expanding or contracting
Well,
by the time you allot it.
yeah, and it's not so much for it, right? Because what we're trying to do is get a representation. Like, we're trying to make this huge question of how much is this going to make me and all the rest of that. We're trying to shrink it down a little bit. So let's say you think it's going to take 10 hours a week once you learn it, and then implementation and all the rest of that type of stuff. So 10 hours a week is 500 hours a year, right? 50 working 50 weeks. 500 hours a year is 25% of your available time if you're working in your business full time. So now you have to start thinking, how much money do I anticipate making this year? If you're thinking you're going to make $100,000 this year, then that 500 hours is worth $25,000 to you in this year.
Mm.
So then your question has to be, do I think that I'm going to make more than $25,000 from doing this thing? Plus, add to it the cost of getting whatever that thing is. So maybe it's a software program and maybe you get it for $500, or maybe you get it for, $99 a month. So that's $1,200 extra dollars. So now you're 25,000. So you're 26,000, almost 27,000. So you have to go in your mind and say, what's the probability, not the likelihood, not the possibility, but what's the probability that I'm going to make $27,000 or more from implementing this thing over the next year?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And here is where we have to really be honest with ourselves. If you haven't ever made any money doing whatever it is you're thinking about implementing, then that probability number should be very, very low.
Real talk. Real talk. That's hard for us entrepreneurs, isn't it?
Yeah, because we're eternal optimists.
Right? I'm telling you, I'm looking at, there's a couple of pieces of software that are on the firing line, because I'm really asking the hard question. Hey, what have you done for me? In fact, what have I done for you to do for me? And if it keeps coming up, and I got one that's like is teetering, because I typically will have two of the same type that do similar things, right? So they're obviously compete for your attention, like in the LMS space, right? So my LMS, I got two different LMSs, right? Learning management
LMS systems. For those of you all, learning management systems,
right? So I'll typically go, okay, this one does this, and you're like, oh my gosh, it just does all this. But then it says, well, but it doesn't do live, it doesn't do this. I can do live sessions. I can book it. So then you go, well, this one costs more. And the learning curve, gets a little, even now I'm like, oh, that's a little gnarly. Right. And then I go, well, what can I do to mitigate that cost to me? And I go, well, instead of building stuff out myself, I'll just go buy templates. And then, I'm finding out that that's working really, really well. Right. And then I'm going, okay, can I take the cost of this and earn X amount? That's what I'll do, everyone, is I'll say, all right, if you cost me $1,100 a year, then you've got to make me multiples of that $1,100.
Exactly.
And then I go, yeah, but has it done it already? That's when you say, if it's no, like Rob said, no, it's not. Well, then you're not either, you're not utilizing it. Why is that? Whatever reason, it's not working for you.
Right. And the key is
yourself.
Yeah, and the key is it's not, and I don't want to go so hard to say that they're lying, because I don't want people getting mad at us and be like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's not that you're lying to yourself, but here's the thing you got to realize. If it's not working, you have to give an appropriate approximation of how hard it's going to be for you to get it to work.
Yeah.
Given the fact that everything that you've done to this point, it hasn't worked yet. Right? Like that inertia moment of getting something to go from 0 to 1 is the hardest moment in an experiment. Once it goes from 0 to 1, now it's just a question of repeating 1, right? You got momentum, you got inertia on your side.
I found that to be true. Yep. Once you learn it, like Alex Hormozy says, he took him 4 years to do a thing. And then he learned it once he learned it, paid attention to it. Or I think it was either 4 years or 4 months. And then he said, once he learned it, it took him 4 hours to build.
Exactly.
And I was out waiting.
Right. And so in that space, getting back to the original framework, the question is, what's the probability? Because you're looking at opportunity cost. You have options. You may have option 1 that has a probability of 70%. You may have option 2 that has a probability of 30%. You may have option 3 that has a probability of 55%. And in these spaces, you may like option 2 the best, but it has the lowest probability of returning you the outcome that you want. So your question is, how much are you willing to lose with opportunity 1 or opportunity 3 to pursue opportunity 2? Because they could all work, but the probability of them working is low. And generally what I found with low probability things, it's not that they don't work. It's just that it takes you longer to figure out how to make them work. And so that time is lost. I remember for my team, right? And I remember, I like to say this from the perspective of like the stuff that we talk about. I don't try to tell you, the book stuff about, don't do this or don't do that because the book said blah, blah, blah. I like to let you know, like, I have made the mistakes that we're talking about right now. I have done, I've walked this path. I've hit that landmine. Like, so I have spent, I remember with my company, one of the things that I spent a lot of time, me and Randy used to go back and forth about this with marketing. I have spent so much money trying to learn marketing and trying to do it myself. But here was the hill that I had to climb, that I had to realize I don't like doing marketing. So for every hour of marketing work that was necessary for my team when I was learning how to do it, or even when I was getting my team who wasn't really great at marketing, right? I was the best marketer on my team. And if I don't like to do it, that's a problem, right? For every hour, every dollar that we put into trying to make this work, it was maybe 5 times harder. It was maybe a 20% probability that it will work over here. Whereas I could put the same dollar or a little bit more money over here and make it work. So to give you an example, I spent $10,000 on a course to have people teach me how to market, how to derive organic traffic, how to write stories and how to copyright, all the things.
Oh yeah. You can spend infinite amounts of money.
Exactly, right? And what I learned was it wasn't the knowledge that was the thing that I was missing, because they didn't really teach me much more than I had already learned in a lot of the other free courses that I had. What I learned was the biggest thing with marketing is that you have to have someone that's consistently doing the work, because it is not the type of game where you do one thing and it works. It's consistency over time. And then you hit a tipping point. And once you hit that tipping point, things start happening organically that you were unaware of. And then you can start doing paid ads, and you can start doing all the rest of that. But the key is you have to have that consistency of effort long enough, right? It's kind of, Zig Ziglar talked about it this way.
Consistency of work
when you go into the rural areas, they used to have water pumps, right? So you'd have to pump the water from the well. And before you could actually get water from the well, like today we spoil because you can just turn on the faucet and you live, right? But you used to be able, right? You used to have to pump and prime the pump.
Oh, I remember that.
Right. And so you just sit there and you're pumping and you're pumping and you're pumping and you're pumping. Ain't nothing happening.
Going into the country.
Yeah.
Right. And then
you're just pumping and you're pumping and you're pumping and you're pumping. And what you're actually doing is pumping all the air that's in the pipe out of the pipe, because the whole way that a pump works is that it's a suction, right? It's like a straw, right? And it's all suction. And so you have to pump the air out first. So you create the vacuum, which then pulls the water out. And now you got free flowing water. Boom, 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 boom. Every pump gives you water. But here's the interesting thing. You've got to prime the pump first. And if at any point in time you stop priming the pump before the vacuum has created, before the water is flowing, you then have the water, the vacuum goes back down and starts over, and you got to start over again. And pump and pump and pump and pump and pump. And so part of getting water is being committed to creating the vacuum.
Now, y'all hearing this, and if your mind sees and listens and hears metaphor, this is like your business. Prime your business pump.
Exactly. And the key,
you might get nothing at first. It's like, this ain't working.
And realize that if you are not the one who wants to prime that pump, that's okay. You're focused on what happens when we got water. Now I got, right? Like you might have a lemonade stand. You might have a whole bunch of things that once you have water, your business can explode.
Your job is to search for potential water sources.
Right. And to look at, if I'm going to go with this pump that I have to prime, and I know that I don't want to prime the pump, then you have to go find somebody to prime the pump. And you want to find somebody that's good at priming the pump, somebody that's done it before, somebody can do it a lot easier. Maybe they have a machine now that it pumps by itself. Maybe they have the patience because they've done it 100 times. They know roughly how long it's going to take. And so the unknown of, I don't know when this thing is going to happen and all the rest, that doesn't bother them as much. Right. And this is what we did in my company. I went and found somebody to do our marketing who they have done these campaigns before. They were able to, in the space of time that it took us, right? It took me and my team about 6 months to do the stuff that the team that I have now did in about a month.
So relative value, team not very good at it already. You being the best marketer, hire somebody, cost you a grip.
Cost me about the
Cost.
same as it costs to make that other decision. And that's the key. That's the thing that I wanted you to pay attention. And here's the other piece. Not only is it better, right? It cost me about the same as it cost. So it was about $10,000. But here's the key. The $10,000 with this team came with a guarantee of performance, number one, that I was able to negotiate into the contract.
That's good.
Because I know exactly what I need. I know exactly what I'm paying for. Right. So it came with a guarantee of performance, number one. Number two, it came with they love doing this stuff, whereas we hate it. So the experience for them is they're excited to do the work that we're talking about.
So you get that. We talk about that, right, in marketing. You got to fall in love with marketing. You know, I mean, you just have to have this. Oh my gosh, you got to see obviously the relative, opportunities and value of what marketing can do, but you got to be kind of like, halfway. You got to be in love with it. You got to go,
Right.
oh my gosh, I love what it brings back to me when I do this.
Exactly, and they're doing testing and they're doing all the rest of the type of stuff with ads, and we already, we just started running ads last week, and one of the things that we did is we built a group, right? And we've done this before. We've done all this stuff before. I built a group. I've tried to get people to the
Well,
group.
yeah,
I've run ads.
I remember.
We've done all this stuff, right?
But
the
that's when
beauty
you were
of it
doing it
is
yourself.
exactly. Number one, we were doing it ourselves. Number two, we didn't know what good looked like on this side. I knew what good looked like after we got clients because that's the part that I'm good at.
Mhm.
I knew what good looked like once we were developing content and putting it in front of people. I knew what good feedback looked like because we got that. But it was all the stuff leading up to that we were still in the dark. Even though we knew how to do it, we didn't understand how to read the feedback. That's what they're good at. So they just did a test campaign. They did all the rest of the type of stuff. We got, I think the first week, we've already got, 10 people that have joined the group. Now they're on our email list. That's growing, and that's in 1 week. And that's what our low part of our ad spend, all the rest of the type of stuff. In another month, we'll have 1,000 people on our email list. We'll have people that have joined the course, that have done all the things that we're talking about doing. And that is, and here's the beauty of it. I go to a meeting 30 minutes every week to discuss what's next.
Mm-hmm.
And then I give stuff back and forth to my assistant and I review stuff. I might put 1 hour to 2 hours into running this operation. And it's already in 1 month returning greater dividends than all of the stuff we did in marketing last year.
See, that right there. And, I have been doing, I've got this, again, I've been, just listening to a lot of courses and stuff like that. I got some that I bought. And in there is snippets of what you just said. Okay, here's how you determine. And in this particular course that I'm looking at right now, in fact, it's up on screen now. It says why you should, he says, look, this is going to be counterintuitive. You're not going to be thinking about it. He says why you should go high ticket first.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's high ticket, 3 to 30,000. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody's ever seen this and you're hearing this, you'll know what course I'm talking about. Why you go high ticket first? He says, because here's the math. And then he did the math and it was like, he says, you don't go low ticket. He says, low ticket comes from your high ticket course. He says, now you may think, well, if I can't sell this low ticket, how am I going to? He said, because get this, it is all in the cost to acquire, right? So
exactly.
He says, for that low ticket item, you would have to spend X amount of dollars and return this much. He said, but if you just sell one high ticket deal, and then he kind of got on you a little bit. He says, now, if you don't believe you got a high ticket thing in you, you shouldn't be out there trying to sell nobody anything.
Number one, and let's go deeper into that. Remember, we talked about those 2,000 hours. This is the thing that I had to come to grips with, because of course, when you start business, you're trying to help as many people as possible. You got this thing, you want to help people, all the rest of that. But again, learning how to get there is the key, and this is where the overall talk we were talking about before about knowing the value of the inputs and the value of the outputs and the opportunity cost comes into play. What I learned, same thing, is I was spending so much time and so much energy trying to get these low ticket items to get off the ground, right? I'm trying to sell books. I'm trying to sell this. I'm trying to sell it, right? But what's crazy is When I go and speak at an event, I generally sell 5 to 10 books per 30 people at an event. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm selling 5 to 10 books per 30 people that are at an event, then it would be, if I did 10 events in a year, I sell 50 to 100 books.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas to go and try to sell 50 to 100 books, I would put in a ton more energy and a ton more advertising, a ton more hours in a marketing campaign. Similarly, when I have a consulting client, right? It may take me 6 months.
That would be your high ticket, right?
Right, which is my super high ticket,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
It's 5 figures, high 5 figures, right? Generally to 6 figures and above. It may take me 6 to 9 months to land that client, but that client, just one, pays half of my bills for the year.
And that's so, to me, it sounds like that's where you can bank all of the value points that anybody and anything you bring into the business. That's what it seems to me, and I could be, I could be wrong, but it seems to me when you're thinking about, okay, I'm going to bring on this financial person or whoever you're bringing in, they should help me do X. And if they help me do X, their value to me equals Y.
Exactly.
Right. And it sounds, I know everyone, you're listening, you go, don't put a value on me, but and this is something I did with one of my, offline businesses is, and my partners were looking at me like I had a couple of heads, but I says, listen, we have to let our manager know what they bring, what we expect them to bring financially to the business.
Yes.
That's a number, because that's kind of counterintuitive, right? Oftentimes you just go, hey, we just hired somebody and they just go to work.
Exactly.
I need them to know, here's why we hired you. We have an expectation that for us paying you X, you will bring us Y.
You're exactly right.
And it was tough for some of the other, because that sounds like a tough stance. It sounds like you're being an a-hole, blah, 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 right? And that's not right. I said, but I believe it would be an incentivization for them to know, okay, here's how I make money for the company and justify me being there. Because quite frankly, I'm going to tell you, quite frankly, and perhaps I shouldn't say this out loud, but I think, as we know the whole retail landscape, bro, and it's tough. And why not just go e-commerce? Right? Why not just get some kiosk and put our stuff in? Blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
Right?
There's a lot of different ways to run the business.
That's what we're always, at least I'm always constantly thinking of. And I'm going, boy, this is a lot, right? And then you got all the other things, nobody showed up, and then whatever. And then you go, well, if we just cut off that whole element,
cost center,
went straight e-commerce. So that's always the
question.
So we're constantly
people
asking
don't realize,
that question,
and I think people don't realize that. And to be clear, I think that it's an imperative. The way that I teach leadership, I believe that it's an imperative for business owners to be able to articulate that to their customers or to their employees. My thing with everybody that's on my team, we believe in transparency. Like, and again, there's some things that are counterintuitive because they're vestiges of the past, right? You got a lot of companies. I think that, I was just talking to somebody, one of my siblings, and they had gotten in trouble one time for discussing their wages with somebody else that worked with them, right? And that was against the employee handbook, was to talk about how much you made versus how much they made, right? And there's a lot of companies where you can't discuss how much you're getting paid. And while I can see the benefit of that from the company perspective, I think that it completely, is overcast, right? Is completely outweighed by the benefit to letting people know what value they actually bring to the company. Because here's the deal. What we know is this: everybody in our company brings a certain value to the company.
Yeah.
And if they can increase that value, everybody wins. Right? But most people who have jobs don't actually understand. Let's go back to the beginning of what we were talking about. Don't actually understand the value that they bring to the company, so they don't know how to maximize that value.
That's
and oftentimes,
incredible.
right, they will sub-optimize the wrong things. So they will try to fix different things that they shouldn't be fixing.
I wonder how much down the rabbit hole you can go when you say, okay, janitor, are they still called janitors? I don't know. Okay, whatever, something engineer, cleaning personnel
Sanitation
engineering,
engineer.
whatever.
Yeah.
Here's what we see as the value of your work.
Right.
I wonder how you can go all, how granular.
But I don't like. But here's the thing. I was just talking to one of my coaching clients about this, because the way that you put it, if you say here's the value that we see in your work, then that makes it my opinion, right? I'm telling you ain't worth nothing. That would make anybody feel a certain kind of way.
That's what I mean.
That's different.
How do you do that?
Right.
How do you show that on the bottom line?
The whole thing about it is you start teaching people how to understand how they create value. Right. So, for example, in my company, one of the things that we do every year is all of our team members, vendors, 1099s, right? We bring in and we basically talk about we do what's called a scorecard review. And we plan for the next year of what our goals are and everything, and what those goals will mean to the company, and what percentage of the benefits of those goals we've allocated towards that particular position.
That's a good conversation.
We give people the opportunity to argue for a higher percentage, to say, no, I'm worth more than that. But when they do, then we give them okay, so there's this, right? For every dollar that we earn, this has to come out, 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 this has to come out. So I want you to go ahead and you tell me, which of these things do you think you deserve to take a dollar from?
Man,
or take money from.
I need to take that class, bro.
Right?
I'm serious, because that's interesting.
And the reason why it's so impactful for me is because I feel like, as an entrepreneur, as a leader, more than an entrepreneur, as a leader in an organization where people have hitched their wagons to your vision, where people have said, you know what, I believe that we can make this into something great. It is my responsibility. It's the one that I take on upon myself. And I believe that every leader should take upon this responsibility to say, got it. The best way for you to help me is to not be an employee, but is actually to think like an entrepreneur, to think like a value creator. And therefore, I am going to teach you how to think like a value creator as part of being part of my enterprise. Part of that is understanding primarily how you create value for the organization, and how that value then translates into everything else that we do. So, for example, my team knows there's a certain percentage of money of every dollar. For example, when we go do speaking events, there's a certain percentage of every dollar that goes to sales. There's a certain percentage of every dollar that goes to marketing. There's a certain percentage of every dollar that goes to the person delivering the speech. Then there's a certain percentage of every dollar. Everybody in my company knows we give 10% of all of our total revenues, or our total gross profits, to charity. Right? Anything that we don't have to pay out in external expenses, we give to charity, right? So they know how the dollar is split. They know what percentage of it goes to paying for their education, for their training, for our end of the year gifts, for our profit sharing. They know exactly how the money is broken down. So they know what percentages are available for them. And so we were just having a conversation with my director of speaking and events, because we were discussing what they were going to get paid based on our hitting their benchmarks and their goals for next year. And one of the things they talked about was they didn't like doing cold calling. So they were, in our previous arrangement, they were getting the marketing dollars and the sales dollars for our speaking events. If they closed a deal that they found, they got the total percentage for marketing and sales. What they began to say was, like, we're really good with these warm leads. Like, our closing percentage is really high. Our time is best spent, in our opinion, following up on these warm leads. It's like, okay, got it. That's the sales part. And so it's what it sounded like is you're liking the sales part a lot, but you don't want to spend your time doing this marketing part, which is taking cold leads and making them warm leads.
Sure. Yeah.
They were like, yeah, we don't. And I was like, I get it, because I don't either. Right. Like, so, okay, cool. You don't want to do this. So, but that has to be done in order for you to have warm leads. So what are some solutions that you all have for us doing that? And they were like, we would love to work with a marketing team. We would love to have some marketing spend, some ads, some things like that would bring leads to us and blah, blah, blah. I was like, perfect. Now, here's the reality.
I spend over here, it takes from here.
If we're going to spend money to go make this money, then that means that money has to come from somewhere, because $1 is 100 pennies, right? Like there's not any extra somewhere that we can go and take that from. So where do you want to take it from? And we all came to the conclusion, okay, we'll take it from the marketing dollars. And what we want to do is we want to have a budget of X, right? And then anything that we make above that, then we get to keep it the marketing dollars, but we'll start with that, and that'll be the way that we work. It's like, cool. And so that allowed me to go out and find them a marketing company that does the marketing, creates warm leads, does all the rest of that type of stuff, because I now have the budget, and they can actually make more money, because in their minds, they were like, if we're doing both, we actually get less events, which means we make less money. They were able to see that. And therefore, if we make less money, even though we're making a higher percentage, they're making less money. And it goes back, I think Myron Golden said this one time. It's like, I would rather have 50% of a watermelon than 100% of a grape. Right? And my thing is, that's something like, I didn't have to tell them, this is what we think you're worth. Because it's not, this is what you're worth. This is what this work is worth to the enterprise, period. Doesn't matter if you're doing it. Doesn't matter if somebody else is doing it. This is what this work is worth to the enterprise. Now, it's a percentage. It's based on how much money we make. It's not based on a individual dollar per hour scheme or any of the rest of that type of stuff. I think a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck because they try to figure out how much something is worth per hour to them, instead of how much the total value of the accomplished task is worth to the enterprise.
See, right there. And everyone, y'all want us to listen. I think that a small course, workshop, whatever you want to call it, mastermind, just on that could be ultra valuable, right? And I'm going to challenge everyone out there to think about what Rob is saying, and ask themselves, ask yourself. First, it was high level. Okay, I had to catch myself kind of going, wait a minute, but what you want? Do you want something like that? In the comment section, say, do you want that? Because I think I can talk Rob into putting that together. Whether it's I got to do all the work and say let's do this, right? Here's some let's do it, or getting him getting somebody to do the slides or whatever it takes, so that he can break that out. Because I think that there's so much value in that. I can imagine waking up, looking at the spreadsheet, and then on the other side of the numbers, you have, okay, action A, value. Potential action B, value possibility. Can y'all see what I'm doing here, right? So then you now are asking yourself, of everything you're getting ready to do, what is the relative value of said action? Right? Can you, because you got kind of in there, my guy. And I'm like, man, how many organizations are armed with that as they go into the marketplace battlefield?
Yeah. Most
how
of them,
many?
Most of them don't. I mean, a lot of the big companies I work with, the finance team knows these things, but operations is completely oblivious.
But employees, you know what? I want to say a different name for them, right? Value creators.
Yes.
Let's get rid of them. Our value creators.
Yes.
Are aware. Would you like to be called a value creator? Think about that for a minute. My value creators. Don't let me forget that, man.
Yeah. No.
Value creators. Hey,
good.
Value creator. Hey, value creator. Hey, value creator. Hey, value creator. Now, does that do something for your soul? Hey, employee. That's a punch in. Whereas, right, value creator connotes something different. Hey, where do you work? I don't work. I create value over there at Leadership Mastery. I create. You do what? Yeah, because they don't call us employees. I don't know where you working, but that's played out. I'm a value creator. Can I share with you how? Would you like to join the value? Oh my gosh, man! Ooh, I'm excited.
Yeah.
So I think a couple of things should happen. I want to wrap up what we were talking about because the excitement that I'm feeling right now makes me want to go create something.
Yeah, I love it.
Right. And I only got 24 hours
Value
with
creator.
any idea to create something and be able to go. And especially with what you do, Rob, is when you're going out to these companies and you're saying to leaders, you got to think about your people in your company differently. You got to lead differently. But if they're always seeing people as employees, that may give them a different perspective on how they lead.
Exactly.
And then the employees don't want to come in. They want to start their own thing because they don't feel valued.
That's it.
Well, let's give them a different name.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. I love
These
it.
are my value creators. Yep. Janitor, creating value. Salesperson, creating value. Here's how much. And if Rob can show you the potential value, then it makes bringing someone else on a whole different narrative, doesn't it? I hadn't even heard that before. So I'm now looking at, in my offline businesses, I'm thinking to myself, I need to be looking at my managers and my assistant managers and my part-time people as here's my value creators, but they need to be made aware of what that value looks like.
Exactly.
So they can go about their business of going, I need to get it.
Exactly.
Because I was coming in, this is what we need to make today. And they're like, get out of here. You can tell it's in their eyes, like, yeah, get out of here.
Right.
Bring me some more traffic and I'll convert. But
right.
if they, how do we get this value, everybody? Well, you need to stand out there with a sign, come in our shop. Whatever. Man, I'm excited right now. Look, what can we leave people with, man, before as we wrap this up? Y'all know what I want to talk about. I want to talk about software. I want to talk about, Chat GPT and how it's game. Maybe we'll get to that, how, create the software and make sure everything you do with software, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But this right here.
And I think, tying that in really quickly, like if that is creating value for us, the software is creating value for it. That's the whole thing. If you can get your mind wrapped around the idea of what are the value inputs to what we're doing and what are the outputs on the other side, and it can get complicated, but you don't have to know all of it. You can get people to help you to look at that and to see that and to see what the value add is of particular operations. I think a lot of times people get afraid of it because we're scared to admit how much of our time is waste. Right.
But see, we were going to go, but I got to break that.
But
how much of our time is wasted or waste?
Is waste, right? How much of our time is waste and is wasted in what we're doing, but it's waste in our process, right? And the beauty of it is that's where your growth is. That's where your exponential margins are. That's where you getting better is, right? I was watching there's another podcast. I don't know if you all out there watch it. It's this podcast called Earn Your Leisure. Amazing group of dudes. They had Robert Smith on the podcast.
Oh,
Robert
I saw
Smith
him on there. Yeah, I didn't look at it though.
Yeah, but it's a great episode, and he's the wealthiest African American in history, and currently the wealthiest African American in the country. Right. One of the things that he talked about was what his company does. He owns a private equity firm. One of the things they do is they go into companies and they basically help them to buy time because they say
he's got software though. I thought.
Yeah, he does software. He does, but he has software that does these things as well, but he comes in and they help companies to grow from wherever to wherever, because what they can say is, here, it would take you 10 years to figure out all the process improvements that you need to figure out, but because we've done it 100 times, we can come in and just show you the process improvements, implement them in your company, and a year from now, you're where you would be in 10 years.
Right, and I think he leverages software to do it.
Exactly, he leverages software to do that. And so the whole idea is
software.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of software, right? The key is you have to know what the software is supposed to do before you can pick the right software. That's the whole key. One of the problems that people run into with SaaS and software as a service and all the rest of these, right? I remember when I was first before I started my company, I was looking and I was working through CRMs, client relationship management software systems. And one of the hardest things was, unless you have the metrics to say this is how much time we spend on the phone, this is how much time we spend following up with people, you can't actually look at the CRM and see how much it's going to improve your system.
Correct.
You have to have a baseline, right?
Correct.
And that's the whole key. And so ultimately, whether you're doing software, whether you're doing whatever, the first thing that you need to know as an entrepreneur is what's your baseline, so that you can then do the before and after. It's just like with those, flipping houses, right? You want to have a before picture so everybody sees the value that you added to the property. If you don't have the before picture, the after picture doesn't really give you a great sense of how much of an improvement it was. It just looks like every other property. It looks like that. But if you do the before and after, then people are like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's good. I used to flip houses. So yeah, I know.
Exactly.
I got pictures right now.
Exactly. And
that's interesting.
That's the whole thing. And that's the part, that's where the value comes in, is being able to show people the before and the after. And as an entrepreneur, you need to be able to understand your before so that you can evaluate whether the after is worth what you're going to pay for, right?
I'm going to watch that episode after this one. I used to have kind of a problem watching those guys I think we may have talked about that.
And
sometimes I was like, oh, I mean, I don't know.
Some of the things that they go into, some of the things they talk about, just like anybody, I don't agree with everything that they say.
Got into the stocks, and then they brought the guy on. He's all made up. And I was like, this is not feeling as authentic as I like it to. And how you kind of go, I don't know, maybe it's some envy in there or something. I don't know. It was like, come on, man. Can't you deliver that a little bit better? Can you
and they transition, right?
Like me.
And this is one of the things that's interesting, right? They move to certain levels, right? And you see businesses, the big part of this journey that I love is being able to watch the phases of businesses. Here's something that we could talk about in another episode. I think that'll be really beneficial for the team, right? The fact that when you're in business, when you're just starting, you got tunnel vision. You can only see your business.
Sure. Yeah.
The longer you've been in business, once you get past that threshold of where you're like, no, this is what I'm going to do, you start being able to pick your head up and you start being able to understand business more. So you start being able to watch the different stages that businesses go through. You start being able to see people and the transitions that happen, that when you're not in business and you see those transitions, there's a much different characterization of, oh, they think they bougie or they this or they that. But when you get into it and you start to understand, you're like, oh, that's what's necessary to go from here to here to here, right? And it's the same thing, kind of an analogy wise. It's like when you watch players that go from bitty basketball to then playing JV to then playing varsity, and then you see those groups that's going to the next level. They start going to summer camps and AAU and all the rest of that. And it seems like to everybody that's not in the basketball crew that they're obsessed, but they're not obsessed as much as they're dedicated to, I know that I'm one step away from this bag. And so if I put it
I've enjoyed every episode I watched. I will get caught up in the characters. It's like watching a movie, but you can't understand. You lose the theme and the message in watching the actors. And if they do something messed up, you're like, did you just
the message gets lost?
And it's like,
and I think this is so I haven't watched the show in a while, but I watched this episode because Robert Smith is somebody that I like to pay attention to. And what was interesting was I think that the vibe was a lot different because they started off from the beginning. This was a show that was really, it was more like the vibe of the Drink Champs moment when they're always saying like, we like to give people flowers on the show. That part, not the whole rest of the Drink Champs, the other 3 hours, but that segment right there where they give people their flowers and they talk about how awesome they are and all the rest of that. That's the thing that I think that show was, Earn Your Leisure, because they were really in awe of and in appreciation of Robert Smith and what he does. So it was an interesting vibe.
I've watched in other episodes when he first started kind of getting more vocal. He had been in business for a long time, right? He talked about how he started and who gave him his first start and all this stuff, right? And he says why he was so quiet while he was growing. And it's pain that we, all have felt that sometimes. Like I'm like, I ain't telling nobody nothing. Where the bag's at, nothing. Because you don't want anyone to be able to affect that bag.
Exactly.
Right. But now you get to a point where you go, you can't affect the bag.
That's
Then
the
you
whole
just come
deal.
out going, I'm paid. So
Exactly. So what?
you can't
And I think that,
cancel me.
and I think personally that is so true. That's such a reality. But having been a teacher and like really all my life, the thing that I've learned is you don't have to teach everybody all the time, but you can look back and say, hey, I'm 3 steps ahead of you. Here's the next 3 steps. That's a small group because some people are 10 steps behind you. Some people are 30 steps behind you. I remember when we were in the Marine Corps, one of the things we were doing, we're running in formation, and there's an obstacle or there's a step or there's something, right? You're running, so you can't see but the person in front of you, right? So you can't see if there's the tree or, when you're running on, around the base and stuff, there's like poles and stuff that are in the middle of sidewalks so the people can't drive down the sidewalk, stuff like that. And so you'll see everybody in front of you will start pointing at the thing, right? And that gets your attention. You're like, oh, run around this, right? Or you'll start hearing up ahead of you, step, 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 step. And then you hear the person in front of you say step, and then you're like, boom, there's a step right there. So you step up. Whatever the case may be, it's not that the person in the front of the pack is talking to the person in the back of the pack. It's that everybody's passing a message back as you're moving so that everybody gets the message when they need it to help them in the moment that they're in. And I think that that's the blend that I'm trying to be in. It's not that I don't talk to everybody right now, right? We talk to entrepreneurs. My business is really about leaders. So if you're not at the space where you've already become a professional and you're moving up the ranks, like I don't have a lot of courses and a lot of stuff for people that haven't gotten to that level yet. Eventually, I've got plans, 20 years from now, I'll have an entire school from K to 12, all the rest of the type of stuff to teach all of these things. But again, that's when I have the bag. That's when can't nobody mess with that. But for right now, I know that I can teach this stuff because the people I'm a couple steps ahead, right? I can just,
that's so amazing. I think let's go ahead and wrap it up right there because we're about to go down a whole nother rabbit hole. And
I think that's what I'm saying. The next episode we can talk some on that.
Okay, we didn't get a chance to talk about Chat GPT, right? Y'all know I'm down with it, man. I'm already using it.
And I was gonna say,
send me some
stuff on that.
But I got to get this in, Rob.
Yeah.
I got to get this in, man. Here it is. And this is what's going to happen over the course of the next year because of AI is coming online for real. Open AI is changing everything, right? And now it's going out there doing its learning by giving free stuff away, right? You can go to chatgpt.com and see some of the power of being to plug something in and it writes for you. Now, a lot of the people in the content space have been using it for a while, to create content and all that kind of stuff. And then Google's trying to fight it by saying, okay, we want humans to write it versus blah, whatever. But it's just been amazing to watch this. But now GPT-3 is coming on so fast. And you've been hearing about art. You've been hearing about, that AI has been trying to rap. You've been hearing about all these areas that used to be
purely human domain,
purely creative driven. And now it's coming up. But in the chat space, it is very similar to what we used to watch on Star Trek. You ask it a question and it gives you an answer back. That's game changer. But in this case, you type something in and it gives you an answer back. I was working with one a couple of weeks ago and I says, Are you human?
Are you what?
Are you human? And it says, yes, I'm human. I was like, what? You're not human. I said, is there a human on the other end of this? But it was playing around. But my point is I was asking it questions and it was just, and then we got some other software that you put in a code in a fix it. That's going to change a lot of stuff. Copywriters, and you're hearing a lot about it now, but it's going to get especially when you go voice. You ask it a question and it gives you back, hey, what should I do in the next? I've been thinking about this for like 3 or 4 years, and says, well, I think I even got the domain called You and Your AI Making Money or something like that, right? 3 years ago. And now, bam, it's right here. How do you? And people are coming out saying, this is how you leverage it. This is what you can use it for, blah, 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 right? And it is becoming a big thing. I wanted to talk about that because you'll be hearing about all things GPT, chat GPT, all that kind of stuff, man. And how Google might become irrelevant because of it. You just ask that a question and it goes and does that stuff for you. And it's not riding on the back of Google.
Interesting.
Yeah, man. So anyway, we'll get to that maybe next week.
I like it. I like it.
In the meantime, everyone, I hope you have a wonderful time. I hope you're able to take this stuff, leverage it, and then, come back and tell us how it worked. Rob and I are going to think about how we can spin up a piece of what we talked about today. Right? But it's only going to be on request. I mean, hey, you get a lot of requests for it, we'll do it. All right. That's it, everybody.
Awesome. Have a great one, everybody.
Yeah, man. That's some good stuff.